For our work with the Golden Age, I would like you to particularly understand the contributions that were made in Spain during the Golden Age of Islam. And at first, you might not think of Spain as a country that is Muslim, but for a very long period in time, it was under Muslim control, and the influence of the Islamic presence there still remains today. As the Umayyads decline in power, there's going to be a coup that takes place, a bloody overthrow by the Abbasids, who will produce our second great dynasty. Now, just on the map here, Damascus, that is the capital of the Umayyads. We're going to move over to Baghdad as the capital or central area of control by the Abbasids. As this coup takes place, however, there is one Umayyad prince who escapes. He escapes with his life. He travels from the region of control now by the Abbasids across from this region, across the back of Africa, and goes into Spain. And it will be there in a kind of area out of the reach, out of the immediate control of the Abbasids, that he's going to continue Umayyad rule and become essentially a prince in that area, that terrain. This influence is going to last from approximately 750 to 1492. 1492, of course, a date that you all remember for other reasons, is an important date in the Muslim world because that is the date of the Reconquista, the final reconquest of Spain by Spanish Christians. Nevertheless, after that time period, Muslim influence remains strong in Spain. And I'd like you for just a second to take a look at this map. Again, all of this orange color represents the Muslim caliphate, the control of the Muslim world. And I'd like you to see that it clearly extends at this point in time into Europe. And Spain would become a very strong portal for knowledge, for books, for manuscripts coming in from the Muslim world to penetrate and to reach the rest of Europe. Although there is Arab and Muslim control in Spain until 1492, the Umayyad dynasty, that clan essentially, will only be the rulers until 1031, when their portion of Spain will be reconquered by the Christians. They're really important to us, however, because they help to establish the leadership in Spain of Islamic rulers, and they also usher in the Golden Age in Spain. The man who survives the coup, the only prince who gets away alive from the bloodbath that occurs when the Abbasids take over, is Abd al-Rahman. And his name is up here. This is just for your reference. I'm not asking you to know his name. But Abd al-Rahman will travel from the region of Umayyad rule. He'll go across North Africa and he will be assisted because his mother was Berber. Berbers are North African. And what that implies to us then is that when he makes it with their help into Spain, and this is a map showing us North Africa up into Spain, we're going to have a blending and a mixing of cultures, and that's going to give us a blending and mixing of styles. The style of the Umayyads in Spain is generally referred to as Moorish, and in fact, we refer to this as Moorish Spain. This is a name, an art name that's named for the Moors. And the Moors, that's a westernization of the, refer to the Berbers in North Africa. And you might be wondering, well, where did they get that from? Well, they got it from Mauritania down here. So that name has been applied to the art style of Islamic Spain. It does imply a blending and mixing, and it is a blending and mixing. Its most notable feature is complexity, and some of the materials produced in Moorish Spain are some of the most outstanding Islamic creations ever. I think you will like them. It will be in Cordoba, where Abd al-Rahman will set up his capital, and he's going to rule from here. It is going to be an amazing city. It's going to outshine every other city that exists in Europe. It's going to be rich, it's going to be clean, well lighted, it's going to have public baths for folks, shops where goods can be acquired easily and for reasonable prices. And of course, it's an Islamic state, so it is going to have mosques that are open for the use of everyone. There's going to be good housing and relative luxuries for all classes. It's going to beat out any of those cities in Europe. Think London, think Paris, that tend to be dirty and crowded. It's estimated, I have in my notes, around 100,000 people in the year 1000 as a population estimate. But for our purposes, probably there are two things that are particularly important. One is that there was simply a brilliant cultural flowering in this city. So it represents the golden age of Islam completely. It is also a city that was filled with tolerance, which is one of its most impressive features throughout Muslim Spain, but particularly here we can document it. Christians and Jews had equal opportunities to Muslims, so that they were treated as equal members of society. As a result of this, everybody could share in the labor, everybody could share in the intellectual growth, and it was a city of incredible intellectual exchange. Ideas could be passed from one group of people, one religion, in fact, to another. Cordoba, which is located in the southern portion of Spain, was an absolute model of the Golden Age, of the Moorish Golden Age in particular. Most of the architecture that was associated with Abd al-Rahman's capital is gone. However, there is one gem that has survived, and that is the Great Mosque at Cordoba, which is justifiably famous. And we're going to take a look at that right now. Although Cordoba was reconquered by the Christians, and consequently the Great Mosque at Cordoba has undergone alterations, we have enough of it left, in fact, a lot of it left. It'll give us a good idea of its original plan. So if we go down, before we go inside, which is what you have in your textbook, I would like you to take a look at an overview. You can recognize immediately two things. One would be the Shawn, that's this, and that's the open courtyard. That was planted with orange trees, and it was referred to as the Court of Oranges. It is the space leading up to the prayer hall, which we're going to take a look at inside in a moment, and that is the covered prayer hall with columns located to help to support the roof. I'm going to explain what has happened to this section of Cordoba, the Great Mosque at Cordoba, when we get inside. But before we leave, I would also like to point out that we have a minaret. This minaret, since the days of the Reconquista of this region, the Reconquest, has been converted to a bell tower. So, under Christian control, if you go up here, you're going to see a couple bells that are hanging. This then can function, and in fact has been converted for use as a Christian church. A tradition I mentioned earlier that has gone on probably since the beginning of a formal religious practice of religious architecture. One group supplanting another and taking the real estate from the earlier religion and converting it for use for themselves. And that's true here in terms of the Reconquest. So in Spain, we're following the basic mosque design. No surprise. We have a minaret, we have a courtyard, or a shawn. Now let's go inside and take a look at the covered prayer hall, which is pretty amazing. This is figure 2.7. You have this in your book, and it is a view into the relatively massive prayer hall of the Great Mosque at Cordoba. And this is the most famous feature of this particular mosque. The historic tradition tells us that when the Muslims arrived and Abd al-Rahman gave the command to build a mosque, there was a Visigoth church on this site. And what the Muslim architects decided to do was to reuse elements of that church and weld them into mosque design. They decided that the earlier structure was too low. So, what they did in order to get the height that they wanted was to manufacture out of old materials that they added to, was to create a double tiered column, which was an incredibly inventive solution. In other words, they end up stacking the columns and they add arches to make them stable. The end product of this is to take simple forms and break them down and add them together into more complex forms, dividing units one into the other, multiplying them into a unified whole. The end result of this is stunning. And when you're standing in this mosque, let's take a closer look. You feel like it's an endless forest moving into infinity. This is classic Moorish taste for complexity, and it is overwhelmingly beautiful. Moorish tastes definitely favor not just complexity, but also decorative effects and skills. You can see that the arches are striped, and that adds an additional rhythmic movement throughout the interior of this structure. One of the features that we see in the architecture here is the horseshoe arch. And if you go over here, you can see one. It pinches in a little bit like a horseshoe at the base or at the bottom. That is generally associated with Islamic architecture, but it was not their invention. It was pre-Islamic. It was used by the Visigoths, who are part of the migrations, the tribal Germanic peoples who come into this portion of Europe, help to overthrow Rome, basically, and become Christianized. It's going to be adapted, and accented by the Moors, who are going to help to spread it through the entire caliphate. In other words, through the Muslim world. Lower right, I have a floor plan of the Great Mosque at Cordoba. And what I would actually like you to focus on is this portion of it right here. Actually, it should come down and extend like that because that's what is original. This has been expanded, so all of this was added. The reign of Abd al-Rahman discovered that the mosque was too small, so they expanded it. And when they expanded it, they removed the fundamental symmetry that is a part of mosque design. So imagine right here a line coming down. This is our shan, this is our courtyard, this is where we have that minaret. And then we come forward, and as we walk on axis, this is what we expect. This is the Qibla wall, this is the mihrab. So we're taking into consideration, and this, of course, is the pillared prayer hall, all of the basic parts that one would find in a mosque. It is the mihrab that is another one of the stunning elements of this particular mosque. The Byzantines, the best mosaicists in the world, are again enlisted. Abd al-Rahman will contact the Byzantine ruler and ask for materials and workers who come to construct this amazing mihrab. It is made of mosaics, but this time these mosaics definitely are glistening because they have gold that is a part of them. What the Byzantines tended to do is put very thin sheets of gold between the shiny pieces of mosaic, the tessera, and that reflects a mystical light, suggesting God's light. The mihrab then actually seems to become a portal, almost as if it is a portal to paradise.